Good morning, and welcome to the next episode of the Leadership Lab, where I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Linda G. Mills, President of NYU, a scholar whose work has covered policy, law, and critically social work. She is the founder of the Center on Violence and Recovery. As a leader, she has explored the impact on people and institutions of violence, recovery, memory, and trauma. She is also the first woman and the first person of Jewish faith to lead NYU. Linda, welcome.
Thank you. So honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We talk a lot with our scholars about leadership being a journey, not a destination, that it's about who you become, not what you become. Can you talk a little bit about where it all began for you?
You know, it's hard to pinpoint, but in part because I'm a therapist, I'd say my childhood. My grandfather was very influential in my life, and when I was 5 years old, he started to tell me the story of his escape from a train after he was picked up on Kristallnacht in Vienna, Austria. And at 5, you don't really understand the story, but you understand the feeling. And the feelings were so powerful that I knew he was telling me something I needed to remember. And what that was, in essence, is in the face of danger, act. And I think that's the beginning of the journey.
That is a very big lesson for a 5-year-old.
Yeah, and there is that. That's the reason I looked at trauma as well, I might add, because you could ask the question, really, at 5 years old, should this child be exposed to this story? When should you start telling the story? And there were many bits and parts of the story that he never told me, and I discovered in my own filmmaking. But he wanted to convey his sense of courage and purpose, and that got through.
That's wonderful. What is the first leadership role you remember taking, even as a child? Anything in school or in college?
So in college, I was vice president for academic affairs or some such at UC Irvine. Later, when I got a job in the provost's office at NYU, I reminded myself that I had played this leadership role as a student and how important that was to my development and what that might mean for how I would work in administration now. And so that was a really formative moment in my history, and one that I think shaped how I think about on-campus politics.
You first joined NYU 26 years ago, is that
right? That is correct, yes.
Wow. Yeah. And now you're sitting here as president. I remember reading something about you saying that as a president, though, you were coming to NYU with fresh eyes. Can you talk a little bit about what you meant by that?
Yeah, it was really important to me that I take a step back and, in a sense, reintroduce myself to the community, but also use the opportunity to listen anew. And that felt really important in a moment when I knew that my presidency could be consequential in a way that was essential in NYU's development. And that was a real focus on a few things. One of them was science and technology, that none of the previous presidents and my predecessors had really focused on the fact that science and technology had completely reorganized not only the disciplines, but the ways in which our world operated, whether that was AI, whether that was quantum, whatever it was. And it's a kind of ironic development given that there was a provost who was a mathematician during that time, there was a president who was a chemist, but what was clear to me was that we hadn't yet focused on science and technology in a way that we needed to. That didn't mean that we didn't have spectacular people at NYU who were experts in these fields, but we hadn't organized things in a way that really declared to the world that we are a science and technology powerhouse.
Why on earth do you think it took a social worker to think about that? Is it because you think about people and understand that this is going to be completely transformative?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one piece of it. Yes, I'm constantly thinking about how is our society changing the way in which people kind of move in the world. But I think that it took a social worker, and now it speaks to the discipline, it took a social worker who looks at the world in a kind of 360 way. And that gets back to my scholarship, that gets back to my work, that there's a way in which no stone can be left unturned. My overall experience of coming in and having this really profound realization was probably the most surprising thing to me. Like, really? We hadn't looked at science and technology and the social worker, many things. Could have been the lawyer, could have been the filmmaker, whatever. But I was stunned, and that was a tremendous opportunity, because the later you come to an issue, the more likely you are to be able to shape it with intention and with the knowledge of what everybody else came to the issue with. So it was truly an opportunity, and it's been a journey.
So that's one of your 4 strategic priorities. Another one is interdisciplinary, which I suppose speaks a little bit to the fact that you are also a lawyer and you have these different strands. Can you share a bit about why that is important?
As science and tech continues to influence our life, it is deeply now intertwined in our humanity. And so it would have been irresponsible to just think about science and tech without thinking about the interdisciplinarity and its impact on other fields, and the ways in which those fields will be absolutely fundamental to how we as a society influence science and technology.
Yeah. I thought another one of your priorities around community flourishing also tied in so neatly with that, because one of the things that I'm really struck by when I go to universities all around the world, and everybody now has an AI institute and they're thinking about AI, but nobody seems to have quite built in what is the human aspect of AI, and how do we make sure that AI helps us to become kinder, better people? So where is the flourishing part of that?
What was clear to me when I identified flourishing as a kind of key pillar was that the focus of universities on educating students often neglects the emotional dimensions of it. And you can't learn if you don't feel good. And this generation has been particularly marked by a set of events, including COVID, that has deeply affected their ability potentially to learn, let alone their ability to work. And I'm not making excuses. All I'm saying is that we need to be mindful of the many dimensions that people come to the educational experience with. And if we are, they can flourish. If we aren't, some will fall through the cracks. And that feels irresponsible.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that at the Laidlaw Foundation I think we're marginally obsessed about is that the university rankings include research, as they should, but the piece around how do students leave the university, not just in terms of their career and their financial strength, but in terms of their ability to flourish in the world. And so the development of them as people, not so much the development of them as workers. So who do they become in terms of character, as opposed to who do they become in terms of career, is something that we like to argue is incredibly important.
I love that, and not enough places, foundations, people concerned about higher education are thinking about that crucial element that defines a life. Before it was, let's put them through this really challenging course of study, and somehow they'll come out stronger, better, and more equipped at the end of it. And for whatever reasons, and we could look back on what has changed, that has changed. And attention to the emotional quality, the EQ that our students may need in order to navigate this really complex world is absolutely essential. And education doesn't move that quickly. So how you integrate that shift is really important. And if you're not intentional about it, you will miss the opportunity to give that perhaps most precious gift of all.
And I think, we would argue that even though we're seeing maybe a crisis around well-being right now, in terms of the need to develop character and human flourishing, that has always been the case.
Absolutely.
Because we don't think anyone leaves a university saying, I know when I get into a position of power and influence, I'm going to lie, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to commit fraud, I'm going to be a bully. And yet we see examples of egregious leadership all over the world and in every sector. So we need to help people build that moral muscle and character so that they can lead well.
And no better place to do that in college, right?
Exactly.
You're at 18 years old, you're well formed at that point, but you aren't completely defined.
Yes.
And those 4 years as you navigate, I mean, what we know about the students who come to NYU in New York, for example, that they come from homogeneous communities. And so they show up with a point of view based on this homogeneity.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're thrown together in New York City, at NYU, in the heart and soul of this amazing place. They're thrown together with a whole group of people that they have never encountered before. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing, assuming you can prepare them for that kind of complexity. And that is our obligation.
And I love the fact that NYU is now 20% of students are first gen to university.
Yeah. And because we're the largest private, that's so many students.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's a phenomenal achievement. Are we reaching a tipping point, do you think, where for young women they can now see role models and don't have to maybe bash into the glass ceilings that perhaps you and I have experienced along the way?
Yeah. I think that that's true. When I go to the American Association of University Presidents meetings, the AAU meetings, which are the research institutions, many, many more of us are women.
What does it mean to you to be the first? Does it feel like more responsibility?
Well, for me, I'm kind of carry inherent more responsibility. That harkens back to my grandfather's story. It feels like I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wish I could have some distance, more emotional distance. I mean, it's been remarkable and a really, really difficult time to be a leader in higher education. So that part has been challenging, but I love this place. And it has been the honor of my lifetime.
Has it been particularly difficult or more complex being a person of Jewish faith?
I don't distinguish myself. It's not like I separate out, this is the woman part or this is the Jewish part or this is... It's been really difficult to witness the levels of anti-Semitism, both in the city and around the world. And it is real and it shows up in profound ways, and that affects me. I feel it and live it. And my task is to embrace the entire community of NYU that I do. And I was well prepared for that. I had been here for such a long time that I feel as though, and my work was often focused on students. So I feel like I've had the privilege of working with students across so many communities. And so on the one hand, it feels like, yes, it's been particularly hard, and I've learned so much from that I then bring back to the community as a whole.
You started as a lawyer and then moved into social work. What made you make that switch?
Yeah, usually people go to social work school and they're looking for more power, so they go to
the other
law
way.
School. Yeah. For me, I went to law school and I was representing people on Social Security disability claims, and it was clear to me that there was a whole emotional dimension to their suffering that called for a set of skills I just didn't have. I didn't know how to sit across from a client who was really what I perceived as suffering from some traumatic event in their life which was manifesting in a physical way. And I just wanted to understand the relationship between the emotions of that and the physicality of that. And I didn't have the skill set, and so I went back and got a master's in social work, and then I started this not-for-profit.
Yeah, the Hawkins Center.
Yeah. Inspired by somebody whose allegation was that the reason they were applying for Social Security benefits was because she had a bad back. But in fact, there was a whole history of depression that was informing her physical problem. And it was a case that brought both the emotional background and establishing the fact that she had a mental health issue to combine with a physical issue. And that became the convincing argument to get her the benefits. That was a kind of light bulb moment where I realized the relationship between the physicality and the emotionality, and that we were all informed by that history. Mm-hmm. And some people were really traumatized by it, and it meant that they couldn't work, actually, as a result. These were legitimate claims. These were people who had experienced real mental health concerns, and it was a challenge to prove it, but when I did, and we did, it was transformative for the small number of people who were affected by it. But that's what inspired the Hawkins Center, which was a combination of supporting people who were applying for Social Security benefits and providing them with support services at the same time. So a legal issue and a social work issue.
As well as founding a center, you've produced films, which, again, I think is quite unusual to have done so many different things. Can you talk a little bit about the films and why you produced them?
Yeah. So my love of filmmaking actually happened by accident, which was that I wanted to carry on my grandfather's story and understand what really actually happened. And my mother hinted that, in fact, it wasn't the complete truth.
Oh, wow.
And that there was probably more to the story. And I didn't quite know what that meant. And I wanted to make sure that I made a movie about that I captured her view of it before she died, before the family, before that part of the family was gone. My grandfather had already died, and my grandmother had already died. So I sat her down in front of a camera and I started asking her a bunch of questions. And then something within us, my sister and I, decided that we needed to go to Vienna and find out what the Austrians had to say about all of this, which we did. And we discovered an archive, and it was a remarkable archive that had not really been made public, et cetera. And so the filming became relevant to actually telling this larger story about the archive. And so I felt this obligation to actually tell the story, and that's how we made a movie about it. So that was my first movie, called Auf Wiedersehen Till We Meet Again. And then I just became in love with the storytelling and the visual aspects of it and the compelling aspects of what making movies, does for the world. And so then I just couldn't stop, and I started making movies. So.
Yeah. And will you continue?
So right this minute, I just finished a 15-minute movie, about a cousin who told me, she died many years ago, she told me as I was making the movie for my mother, I interviewed everybody in the family. And she told me the story of her family going to Shanghai during the war. And so I remember I was in Shanghai and I visited the Jewish Refugees Museum there. Obviously, we have a campus there. And I visited the museum, and they had put up a wall of names. And their names were up there.
Oh, wow.
And I was completely blown away by this. And so I came home and I searched for her interview. And it was, discs at that point. And this was a long time ago. So there were discs, and I found her interview, and I have done a 15-minute short story of her journey, and I've collected a lot of archival material to back that story up. And so I just made this 15-minute movie. I could do it at home. I could do it at 4 o'clock in the morning when I got up and I felt like I wanted to do something different. So I was able to make it, and it's taken about a year and a half. It will ultimately live at the Jewish Refugees Museum in Shanghai. Yeah.
That's amazing.
moving.
So talking about Shanghai, you were head of global engagement here for 10 years or so. I read something where you talked about global engagement as a kind of alchemy or magical alchemy, which I just love as a concept. Can you just share a little bit about why you said that?
Yeah. It was about the time I was becoming president. When I think of alchemy, I think of the ineffable, that there is magic, ineffable, that there is a force. Some people call it religion, other people call it spirituality, some people find it in meditation. It's broadly speaking, but this idea that there is something that we don't see. And that's what happens when people encounter or have global encounters. And that is clearly the magic of NYU Abu Dhabi. That is clearly the magic of NYU Shanghai, even the magic of New York that I talked about earlier. But something about the transformation that happens when you encounter something that is so different from you that it shakes you into your very core thinking in new ways. And that is what we do at NYU, and that is what we do at NYU in New York, Abu Dhabi, and the 16 campuses, NYU Shanghai. There's something very magical about how you have to stop and listen when somebody says things to you that are just so different from your experience. And you just have to say to yourself, wow, I thought I saw the world in a complete way. And now it's so incomplete, and I have to think anew. So that's what I'd say is what I meant by alchemy.
So we're speaking today, obviously, because NYU Abu Dhabi is part of our scholarship program. And I mentioned when we were chatting beforehand that when Lord Laidlaw and I went to visit, we were absolutely blown away by the students. I mean, just so smart, so driven, so charming, so appreciative of everything that they were receiving at the university. And this was before we'd actually launched our scholarships. It was our discovery visit to say, would NYU Abu Dhabi be a good partner? And first set of scholars starting this summer, the applications were through the roof. I mean, way higher than universities where we've had a partnership for 10 years. So just that level of enthusiasm is just so happy-making.
Exactly.
But you were there right at the beginning, right, in founding the university. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of designing how we were going to think about students and who would come, and the fact that we had to get the best possible students from all over the world. So the first kind of defining moment was who are these students? And we all decided that the right answer was from all over the world. And then the question became, okay, how do we find the best possible students from all over the world? We had no network, there was nothing. I mean, we had no means. We partnered with the Institute for International Education that had offices all over the world. And together in that partnership, literally, I would, together with a few other faculty members, host these events for college counselors, where we would say, we know students have decided where they're going to college, but we want to put this on your list because you have to, and here's why. And we sold this compelling vision that didn't exist. I mean, it did in our heads. Yeah. We could see it, we knew what it looked like, but we hadn't built it yet. And so we had to ask them to have a leap of faith, both the counselors and the students, because the counselors were who were going to convince the students it was worth applying.
And I guess the parents.
And the parents. And the parents would often say, what do you mean? You're going to go to Abu Dhabi? And so all of those very big, important questions just became a way to dream. And NYU Abu Dhabi lives that dream. I have the privilege of teaching the students sometimes when I go, and it is such an amazing experience to be in that classroom. You describe them as brilliant and wonderful and grateful and all of those things, and global. So they start every answer to a question with, well, I'm from Peru, or I'm from Mexico, or I'm from Sudan, or I'm from, and by the time you're done teaching that class, it has been a class in something that you never thought would be possible. It's truly staggering.
Right now, of course, it's got a whole lot more complex. I caught up with Fabio Piano, the current amazing Vice Chancellor there, and he mentioned to me that when things started to get very difficult, and he was worried about safety and so on, that you had sent an email to him just saying, I don't want you to worry about anything. I trust you to do the right thing for our students, for our staff. And so I'm transferring some money, so at least you don't have to worry about that part of it. And we both agreed that that was the epitome of brilliant leadership, not interfering, but giving him the support that he needed. I don't know that many presidents would have done that. What made you know that that was the right answer and be so quick to do the right thing?
Yeah, well, let's start with act in the face of danger. So that's one of the reasons why that story that my grandfather instilled in me is so foundational to who I am and to my leadership style. I have, over the course of the many years that I ran global, I had to evacuate people. So these challenges were not the first time I confronted them. So I have a deep confidence in our ability to navigate. It's a team of people. It's a combination of instilling that sense of complete confidence that this is going to be fine. We are getting through this. We know how to get through it, from chartering a plane to every step of the way reassuring people that you're going to be fine. And so a combination of kind of a guiding light, but clarity that we can do this.
One of the Laidlaw values is fast, and it's the one that we often get the most pushback on. And yet I think pace is sometimes the most underrated leadership trait. And I think you demonstrated how important it is, and that ability to
fast
act.
Is wonderful. I love that. It's the ability to act in action. And holding back and taking your time when it is clear that is exactly the opposite of what is necessary. It's powerful. It's powerful. And once you live it and do it, you know this obviously, based on your own work. You know, once you live it and do it, you feel much more confident each time. Yes. You're able to make those decisions because you have seen a host of previous decisions that have paid off.
You've obviously met leaders from all walks of life. What are some of the traits that you think people might underestimate in leadership?
Emotional insight. It guides me all day long. You know, my legal training is absolutely essential to this job. What people don't generally value is the significance of the emotional underpinnings of whatever is going on. And because I'm trained as a therapist, it is ever present in my toolbox. But many people from all walks of life don't stay attuned to the emotional underpinnings, and that is absolutely essential. If you miss that, you're missing a whole part of the forest.
What's your ambition for the university?
Oh,
what's your hope?
My hope. I think that New York can and should become the center of the universe on all things, including the center of the science and technology universe. Yep. We have all the elements, and the question is, how do we turn the dial? That's the effort of the next few years, NYU being a leader in that realm. But my ambition is based on the fact that my ambition for NYU as being the leader is based on our global connections, whether it's to the UAE, whether it's to Korea. At the heart of our success has to be the idea that we're connected to the world. And absolutely, we have done that better and in some respects more meaningfully than any other university in the world.
I'm going to have to ask, I'm going next to the University of Toronto,
Oh.
and I'm going to have to say to Melanie, okay, do you agree?
Yes, I understand. There's real competition between us.
think
I just saw her at the AAU meeting.
She's wonderful, isn't she? We have a tradition on this podcast that the last guest asks the next guest, without knowing who they are, a question. So Stephen Carter, who is the CEO of Informer, global publishing powerhouse, said that right now there's a bit more of a focus on what could go wrong than what could go right, and particularly for young people, that can lead to a feeling of pessimism or slight hopelessness. So his question for you is, how can we dial up the optimism?
I love that. So Professor Jonathan Haidt, who is the author of The Anxious Generation, the best-selling book, and a Stern faculty member, has had a tremendous influence on my thinking here. And what I'd say is that we have to put our phones away, and we have to recultivate the ability to talk to each other without mediating through a phone. And we have created this program called In Real Life with John. John Haidt had always imagined that his work would be in K through 12. That was really where, right, the return of the childhood.
Yeah.
And so you're no longer a child by the time you get to 18. So all the work was happening there. And as you know, countries have adopted his policies. So we said, what about college? Like, we can break this. And he has a class where he essentially teaches them how to break it, their addiction to it. It's quite amazing. You make your phone gray rather than color, less attractive. You get rid of most of your apps. There's a whole, regimen.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to watch college students who have grown up without any breaks, and now they're taking a break. So I'd say the optimism will come by putting your phone away, stop letting it rule you, and to actually do this. What an amazing experience it is, truly.
That's fantastic. And what would you like to ask? Well, Melanie.
Okay, very good. So we've talked a lot, and it is clear in who you are in the few minutes that I've had the privilege of spending with you. Joy. And so what I would say is, it's really hard. How do you bring joy into your leadership style?
That is a fantastic question. Thank you so much. I would love to carry on chatting, but I know you have a gazillion priorities that you need to head off to look after. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susanna. Thank you. Thank you.